Santana going to be joining us?
I believe so.
Okay.
Texting her now.
Let's see here. Let's see which one of these are better. I like this better.
I just got the message that Santa Pueblo is live now. So
Well,
neat how that works.
It's it goes straight into there.
Yep.
So we should be live on YouTube. Should be live on Facebook. And I think that's the only place that we sent it to.
Santana said that she's joining us.
Okay. I'm gonna step away real quick until she gets here.
All right. But we are live, right?
How's everything going at the office?
There's Santana.
Just trying to
Nice.
figure it out for a while.
Yeah.
Well, you made it.
Yeah.
We're going to give a couple of more minutes because we try to see if we can, those folks who got the notification that we went live, they recognize that and decide to join us. Right now, it shows that we have one person watching live, but we haven't gone live in a while, so I think that people are not necessarily used to it. So we're going to give them an opportunity to get ready to join us.
I'm going to post something on our Facebook also.
Okay. It went out on our social media, regular Facebook, our Facebook group, YouTube, and I think Tribal Council. It did a acknowledgement that it was there. So let's see if we give it a couple more minutes, and then we can go. So, like we talked about earlier this week, it's we just want to make this a conversational awareness event, give people an opportunity to get to know who you all are, and to get your expertise on mental health and substance use. Maybe even throw a little trauma in there because of its relationship to the other two. And get the community familiar with who you all are. So I'm gonna give it's 11:06. We'll wait until 11:07 on my end. Start.
Can you see if people are watching?
We can, yes. There is a notification right now. There's one person watching on the Sinai Facebook page.
Okay.
There's no one watching YouTube. There's no one watching on the Facebook group. But that happens even when we did our COVID updates. It took a little while sometimes for people to get on, but it does record. People can go back and watch it later if they need to, and that way there's that opportunity. All right, here we go. Well, good morning, everybody. Um, so my name is Troy. For those of you guys who don't know who I am, there's some people who have not watched our Facebook Lives in the past, but I am the Health and Human Services Director here at San Pueblo. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's conversation that's pretty much focused on um, mental health, especially since May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And as a licensed therapist myself, I find myself having conversations and answering a lot of questions about mental health on a regular basis. But this month, I wanted to invite um, other professionals um, to join the conversation to bring awareness to mental health to the Pueblo of San Ildefonso, and to try to make um, the knowledge of mental health, substance use, um, trauma, part of the regular conversation as opposed to not being that. Um, you know, the conversations that we're going to have this month are going to provide an opportunity for professionals and individuals to speak about mental health, as well as to have or to make the direct connection between trauma and historical traumas experienced by the indigenous ancestors and challenges related to substance use disorder, alcohol use, drug use, dependence, in the context of awareness specifically for Sinai. So, for those of you who don't know, today I'm here with Brian Serna and Santana Titla from Serna Solutions. Serna Solutions and the Pueblo de San Ildefonso recently reached an agreement to provide counseling and other interventions for the Sinai community members in the area of addiction and trauma and mental health. And this falls in line with the priorities that Governor Makino set, for the administration to make these services available to the members in the community. And on behalf of Sinai Pueblo, I would like to thank both of you for being here and helping us to spread awareness. I'm going to start by giving both of you an opportunity to talk about where you work, what your experience is in this field, and what services that Serna Solutions will be offering to the community. Starting with you, Brian, you tell me a little bit about
Sure.
you and your experience working with tribal nations,
Sure.
especially counseling and substance use.
Yeah. So my name is Brian Serna. I am a native New Mexican, and I grew up in Santa Fe for the most part. And I have been in this field since '01, which at this point is 22 years. And I am a licensed clinical counselor, a licensed alcohol and drug abuse counselor, and I am the owner of Serna Solutions. And so Serna Solutions is a behavioral health provider in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and now Pueblo de San Ildefonso. The reason I'm tripping over my words is I was just getting out of a different conversation where I was talking about my work in Santo Domingo. And so Santo Domingo was the last job I had before I started working on my own company. And so I've worked in Santo Domingo as the Kiwa Family Wellness Program Director. Before that, I was in Tesuque Pueblo, where I was the Health and Human Services Division Director. Before that is where I worked with Santana, which is at the Pueblo of Isleta. And then before that, I worked for the state government. I worked in Oregon. I worked for nonprofits, all in behavioral health, mostly dealing with people with addictions, but also people with any other mental wellness struggle, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, all of it. Young people, older people. So I've been doing this work for a while, and I'm excited to partner with you all and bring some services to Sinai.
Thank you, Brian. And Santana, how about you?
To follow that, oh my goodness. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Santana Titla. I'm Acoma, Pueblo, and St. Carlos Apache. I have been in this field for a while. Um, I first started out I work for Serna Solutions as a substance abuse counselor. I've been with Serna since July 1st. And I first started working at New Sunrise Adolescent Treatment Center in San Fidel. Is it San Fidel? In Acoma. I say Acoma because it's right next to ACL Hospital. I was there, and then I started working for Acoma Behavioral Health as the prevention generalist, and then eventually their gambling addiction service coordinator. And then, well, I was there for 9.5 years. And I also worked with adolescents, I worked with adults with substance abuse issues. Um, I obtained my license, my LADAC, in 2008, I believe. And then I started working for Isleta Behavioral Health as a substance abuse counselor. And I was able to continue providing prevention activities, a lot of outreach with the community. I was able to create, well, in Acoma as well, events that community were able to involve themselves in. And it usually centered around wellness, participating in everyone's own wellness. Um, and I worked for Isleta for 12.5 years, and I was able to create the um, Rock Your Mocks 5K run and walk, and that this year will be their 11th year, and I'm really proud of that. It's a huge event in Isleta, and everybody is keeping that going. I'm also the state coordinator, one of the state coordinators for the Red Ribbon Relay Run, and I believe this year it is their 31st year. It's something up there, but I've been with them for quite a long time. I would say at least 12 years. It might be more. I'm not even sure. I lost track. I have so many shirts. Um, and then I also created the Indigenous Peoples Day run, and I'm hopeful to continue that. I was able to also create some youth events within Isleta as well as in Acoma. And so I look forward to working with San Ildefonso as the program director and providing services to the community for substance abuse. It's it's been a really long journey because I used to actually um, live and go to school, well, in San Ildefonso. I have a family member, my brother, my older brother who lives in the community. I have my nieces and nephews, the Titlas. And so we're considered the New Mexico Titlas because all the other Titlas are in Arizona, my Apache family. And so I don't know what the math is as far as like how many years I've been in this field, but it's been a really long time. And I look forward to sharing all of that experience, knowledge with the Pueblo.
Thank both of you for for all of that information. I think that the Pueblo has been in need of these services for quite some time, and I just I think it's a long time coming, and I appreciate you all willing to put your efforts into and bring your knowledge, skills, and experience to uh, work on some of the challenges that our community members are experiencing. So I definitely appreciate that. And with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation, but I have a series of questions that I kind of want to guide the conversation just to kind of work on bringing that awareness. And one of the things that we tend to um, see when talking to people is that there isn't a true understanding. And this is not just in the community, this is in our society of what mental health is and what the difference is between mental health and mental illness, because people tend to look at them both as the same thing. And so What I wanted to do is, because that is part of what breeds and encourages stigma. And so I wanted to see if both of you can provide some of your expertise explaining what mental health is and what your idea about what the difference between mental health and mental illness is, so people can get that understanding.
Cool. Do
Would
you
you
want to go first, Santana?
No.
Okay. How about I go first this time and you go first over the next one?
Okay.
Okay. So, in general, my understanding of mental health and mental illness is it depends on who we're talking to. First of all, in professional circles, we don't even use mental health much anymore. We use behavioral health, and just to define that term, it's basically like a bigger term, like an umbrella term for mental health challenges and substance use challenges, addiction challenges, all under that same umbrella. That's what behavioral health is. And it comes from the idea that, if you change your behaviors, you're going to be healthier, not just physically, but mentally, maybe even spiritually, right? Behaviors are what we can do. So, like, for example, if my behavior is to spend more time in nature, right? I say, I'm not feeling well. I think I need to go hang out by the river just for the afternoon, just to get reset. The behavior is going to the river, but you can imagine it affects our mental health, our mental wellness. It gives us mental wellness and affects our mental health just by doing something so simple as that behavior. And then it works the other way too. Like a behavior could be that when I get home tonight, I'm just going to drink a lot of whiskey, right? That's a behavior. And that interferes with my physical health, my mental health, all of it, right? So, but mental health in general is just an idea that, humans have a lot of aspects to ourselves that make us a human. And so we have the physical aspect, the mental aspect, and then the spiritual. And also the relational. So I guess there's 4. So relational just means like, what are the health of your relationships? And so those are all things to look at when you're trying to help people. And when we're trying to improve someone's mental health, we should be looking at all of those things, not just one thing, right? Some of it, as a therapist, we might focus on someone's thoughts. But if we don't give them, like, let's say, skills to improve the health of their relationships, like communication skills to improve their relationships, we can work on their thoughts all day. But if they're still in an environment where they're always arguing with the person they love the most, their whatever we do with their thoughts isn't going to be all that useful. So we do have to, when we talk about mental health, sometimes we get really focused on one thing. Like some people will say, well, I don't have depression, so I don't need mental health. But mental health is really just like, it goes over everything, right? Your physical health, relational health, and spiritual health. It's all mental health, and some people, you might even hear people say something like, well, I don't have mental health. Like, but that's kind of a meaningless statement, right? That's like saying I don't have health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody says that, or I don't need mental health. And of course, everybody needs it. I think, sometimes people just have the stigma of talking to a professional about something that they feel like they should take care of on their own, or at the very most, like they should talk to somebody in their family about these things, but definitely not a stranger, right? And so there's a lot of stigma there because for some people, they feel embarrassed, like if they can't figure out why they feel so bad, why they feel so sad, right? Or they can't figure out, why do I always feel so nervous, so anxious, right? Why am I always so stressed? Why can't I let things go like other people seem to let things go? And I think that, to admit that you can't do that like the way you think other people are doing, there's some shame around it. Like, I see somebody like Troy and I'm just like, well, why can't I, like, he probably deals with a lot of stress and it doesn't bother him. Why does it bother me so much? And then I feel embarrassed about it. And then I'm less likely to go and get some help. But the reality is, everybody on the screen, if you're watching this, all three of us, I'm sure, have had challenges. Um, Santa gave me a thumbs up. I know that I have, and I see a professional. I've seen a professional off and on since I was in high school. First for family stuff, and for just different things throughout the years. And I think that the way to get around stigma is we all need to talk about it, and it helps when celebrities talk about it, right? Like I like The Rock. I don't know who doesn't like The Rock. But he's been talking about his struggles with depression quite a bit recently. But he's not the only one. There's a lot of people talking about their struggles with mental health issues, including professional athletes. But that's fine and good. But I think what really needs to happen at the community level is that community leaders, including grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads and uncles and aunties, they need to admit to other people in the family that, yeah, I struggle. I'm struggling now, struggled in the past. Um, and once people start admitting those things at the local level, then the stigma starts to erode a little bit. I don't think, when celebrities come out and they say something, it helps, but it's just not the same thing as seeing somebody that you love and care about, who you respect, and say, like, I never knew that you struggled with that because you seem so put together. And then the other person says, everybody does, we're all struggling, and we all know how to put on a face, and we all know how to be professional, and we all know how to work hard. But we all are struggling, and it's okay, and it's normal.
You said a lot of good things in there that resonated with me, and I've always, when I teach classes, especially to young people, about mental health awareness and what to do if they are having struggles with mental health. I always try to make sure they understand the difference between the two, mental health and mental illness, right? Mental
Mhm.
health is technically, it's like the overall psychological and emotional well-being of a person absent illness, right? So absent disorder, absent dysfunction. And I know that we are steering away from mental health and going more towards behavioral health, but I always want to make sure that people understand that they are two distinctly different things, because behaviors are how the mental health manifests, in
Mhm.
how you present to the world. And mental health can just be what's internal. It's what you're dealing with and struggling with internally. And yes, maybe, I guess, isolation and not speaking to people could be technically be considered a behavior, so to speak, but people don't see it that way. So I always try to make it clear that there is a difference. The absence of a disorder or disruption of your mental health is mental health. When there is disruption or dysfunction, then there's mental illness. And so that's kind of the way I've always tried to explain to people so they can understand it. And when you were talking about all those things, like the celebrities, um, there are so many celebrities. I have a big collage of faces on my PowerPoint when I do my presentation, of all these celebrities that have been open about their mental health struggles over the years.
Yeah.
And it helps for younger people to see that, because it makes them understand they're not by themselves, they're not alone. But sometimes it does help to see someone that's in the room next to you,
Yeah.
someone that feeds you every single day, the one that is responsible for your well-being every single day, admit and say, "Yes, I've had these struggles before. I dealt with these. In fact, I still deal with these, and
Yeah.
this is how I handle them." And
Mhm.
so I appreciate a lot of everything that you said, because it helps people to kind of, look at it from a big picture standpoint, as opposed to just looking at it as depression or anxiety or PTSD or bipolar disorder or whatever the issue is. There's more to it than that. And I didn't know, Santana, if you had anything to add. I just wanted to give you that opportunity before we go on to the next question, unless you think it's all been covered.
Brian always covers everything so well. But I also learn so much once again over and over from Ryan, because he does have the gift of gab here. I do think I forgot to mention, May the 4th be with you.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. May the fourth be with you.
Mm.
And all those Catholics, and also with you.
Yeah.
And I guess I think just I know within Native communities, it is difficult to speak about any of that, anything that is brought up, whether it is behaviors, whether it is something internal, um, because I think we have so many responsibilities in our own ways, as in, like myself as an auntie, I have responsibilities to teach and also to learn. And with our grandmothers, there's um, we need to take care of them. We look at them as our main resource for knowledge and understanding. And and so my age group, which is, we'll say 45, 50 plus up there, um, the expectations are big because, one, this generation, um, we're in leadership roles as far as traditional roles, and that, I don't know about anybody who's watching, but that's scary. Because I know for myself, learning our traditional ways and our traditional duties, everything that it involves, um, it feels like we've lost so many treasures, so much knowledge when our loved ones pass. And and it, and it feels like a scramble, and it feels strange and odd and shameful to ask for that help. And so I can see how that can impact a lot of people as far as the lonely piece, not being able to reach out, because that's not the only struggle that there is happening. We have a lot of family issues within our communities, and I think there are strong relationships within our Native communities. It is the way we interact with each other. It is just so different and unique, and very personal. Like, I know for myself, um, I watch my son grow up, and he's considered an adult now. He's in his early 20s, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, did I teach them that? Did they learn that from me? Like, oh, this is my sunshine. Like, and it feels odd to be in that space now, because I'm sure my mother felt the same way with me. And so I think these changing roles of us being now the caregivers of the community, it's a lot of responsibility, and it weighs so heavily. And I can't imagine having those family issues as well as substance use issues. And I have to say, we all are impacted by every single one of those within our Native communities.
Those are some very powerful words that you said. I mean, I've spoken to members in the community who have expressed some of the similar concerns. They grew up with their own challenges, and now they are in the leadership positions. They're considered elders, or those people who are going to be speaking to those people who need that guidance, to kind of navigate the same challenges they navigated, and maybe differently than they did, because they realized maybe they didn't do it so well. Right? They had their own difficulties, and now they're there to guide these younger people, and it's scary. Like, well, what if I make a mistake, or what if I do the wrong thing? But I think there's a really, really important point that you made, and that is making sure that we talk about these things, right? And so my follow-up question to the original question is, Santana, what do you think can be done to try to encourage community members to talk about these things more and make it part of the normal conversation? Because there are those traditional and cultural ways that kind of have steered people to more towards silence and handling it within their own homes and within their own circles. But in order for these things to be overcome, it needs to be part of the regular conversation. I mean, what do you think needs to be done to help that become?
Well, I think I know for myself the original reason why I started creating events for the community that involve the community, as far as putting it together, um, creating themes. A lot of that is one, to create a non-threatening atmosphere and event, an opportunity to participate in their own wellness in some way, in some fashion, that that whether it is within their own home, within their own community, that they're they have these skills that are needed to create something for each other and even for themselves. And when we feel as though we are a part of something needed, that can create all kinds of conversations. And I think with those conversations, you gain trust. There's more familiarity. There's learning about each other in a different way. We can see each other from a different lens of um, we're in this together. We can keep going from here. What are you doing tomorrow? There's so many different avenues that it can take on, or even just like the usual greeting, how are you doing? And then actually have a real answer. And that's when you have that familiarity and um, a safe place. I think it can come naturally. And especially with Native communities, we do have to come together. We do have to share something in common. And there's so much that we can add to each other. I know so many moccasin makers, and I'm like, man, I need some moccasins. I need to have this conversation with this person. I don't know what it's going to be about, but we're going to talk because I need some moccasins. Or somebody makes some good fry bread. I don't know. I make fry bread, but I don't know how to make it that good. I need to have a conversation. Or this person, they have the most beautiful home. Like, what do they do to make this home so beautiful? Because I went there for feast. That I see them walking every day, or they clean their yard, whatever it is. There's so many different things that we share and see when we don't talk about it. And I think again, those non-threatening opportunities just can create so much more conversation. And we're humorous people. We love to share that time together and just give each other a hard time or a good time. It just depends. So I think that's the piece that can be really impactful.
Hmm.
What I've noticed about the work that I've done with Native communities is that there's always a strong emphasis on community, right? On connection and community, and that to me, I think, is where the power can come from, right? To improve this, focusing on using community, using connection to try to improve and increase communication and conversation. Because they always say knowledge is power, but I think that's an understate. It's understated because there needs to be communication to gain that knowledge. Whether it's from the elders going down or from the young people going up or laterally across, there has to be communication to build that power. And community is one of the best ways um, uh, to to build that, especially in with people who that is who they are. Community is who they are, and so um, you're right. Those activities and giving people an opportunity to have positive interaction and just interaction in general. Because after COVID, what happened? Right, we were locked down and people weren't hanging out. They weren't talking. With the increases in all the mental health concerns post COVID, I mean, indigenous communities are already, having challenges with that already, and then COVID came across, and so I think that's going to be helpful moving forward. And I know that you all have talked about groups and things like that that you might be bringing to the community, which can help with that, and which we'll get to that a little bit later. But that's great. Brian, did you have anything else to add to that?
The only thing I would add is I think sometimes people are reluctant to talk about mental health stuff, addiction stuff, because they feel like they don't have the knowledge. They feel like they don't know what to say. They're afraid of doing harm, Like they'll see somebody who's really down and they'll look at them and then they'll avoid them. And then they say, well, I should give that person some space. Right. And the person who's down, they could interpret that as like, nobody even cares. Nobody even cares, like what's the point? And so what I want to encourage people to do, it's part of stigma reduction, but it's also just, if you needed like permission or encouragement, here it is. When you see somebody struggling, talk to them. And you don't even have to know what to say or have the answer, right? A lot of times what they just need is to know that somebody cares. Mm-hmm. Somebody sees that they're struggling, and now they're not alone in it. So I think that's a big piece is, and it helps. It helps, and it becomes less scary when you do that. Like you might see like even like a young person who seems so down, and you're so worried about them, but you don't know what to do, and just talk to them, feed them,
Yeah, it always helps.
Both of those at the same time. And again, you don't need to know what to say. You don't need to have the answer. You don't need to know how to help them with that issue, right? You just need to connect. And that's what keeps people alive. That's what keeps people, moving forward is connection, And I think that we're all saying that in different ways. That's really kind of, I think the root of it is people need to feel connected. No matter what they're dealing with,
and stop worrying about saying the right or wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
Somebody just needs to hear, hey, I noticed that you look a little down today. I mean, how are you doing? And now all of a sudden they're like, wow, somebody noticed.
Right.
And really, was that anything special to say? No, you just acknowledge the person. And people always say, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell them. I don't know. There's no magic word. I mean, we've been doing this work for a while, and there's sessions and I'm like, I have no idea what to tell this person, but we work through it, right? In conversation, because there is no magic word or phrase or statement. Sometimes you have to follow the person, and you can't follow the person if you don't start the conversation. So,
and follow your own intuition.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I think people either they work alongside them or they see them at a community event or they're just in their family and they feel like something's off about that person, mm-hmm. but they don't trust their own intuition. They're like, no, I can't ask them about it because, they seem okay, but I feel like something's off.
Or they say, I'll talk to him about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And sometimes tomorrow's late, right? It's too late. Because things happen, so if you see it, we all know each other, that we're around each other all the time, and we know when people are acting differently, say something.
Yeah.
So if both, and this question is for both of you, if you is there a misconception about mental health or behavioral health that you know of, or you hear all the time that you'd like to kind of dispel, kind of like
myth busting,
change people's opinions about,
sure,
or at least their thoughts. Tell me what you think. Tell me one of those that you can think of.
Well, I have one right away, and that has to do with addiction. And the first thing I want to say that not a lot of people know is that there are more people in recovery than there are actively addicted. And that's just, sometimes people can feel like, once you start using, once you develop a problem, you're just basically headed either to the grave or to prison. There's that kind of belief out there. But the reality is there are more people in recovery from addiction than people actively addicted. We just don't know about it. Not everybody lets every other person know. So I think, and related to that, like the myth busting there is sometimes people, whatever like the big drug on the block is, or the new crisis like opioids or meth or whatever happens, there are certain drugs sometimes that have such a stigma that people feel like, well, if you try that once or you do it once, it's over. Like there's certain things you can't walk away from or you can't come back from. But the reality is, a lot of people in our field are in recovery. And some of them are in recovery from these things that we're thinking that most people thought were a death sentence, like using meth, right? Or smoking crack cocaine was thought to be a death sentence. Like once you cross that line, you're gone, right? But there's no line. People can recover at any point. It's unpredictable, and also just people sometimes get frustrated when they have a loved one with an addiction because they don't snap out of it right away. And and I would just say that when you look at the rates of like relapse with substance use, they're actually better than people who are trying to change their diet, who have diabetes or high blood pressure. And yet, we don't get all judgy that, like, I can't believe I saw them. They had a donut, and like, on the donuts again, it's just like, there's just so much stigma with addiction, and the rates are pretty good for recovery. And I think that's the one that comes to my mind as, like a myth to break that's out there, is that families will write off their loved ones with addiction sometimes because they feel hopeless. There's nothing hopeless about it.
It's interesting you brought up the food part too, because people think of addiction and all they think about is illicit drugs, right? But you know, sugar consumption in many cases for some people causes the brain to release just as much dopamine as some of the drugs do. So the addiction
Yeah,
is there just like it is for any of the other things. Not to
totally.
mention alcohol is legal, right? And you know, that is one of the things that people struggle with the most. And so yeah, that's a big one because addiction is something that's stigmatized, I think, even more than other mental health disorders or diagnosable mental health disorders. Did you have one, Santana?
An addiction? Yes, I do.
No, not an addiction. No, a misconception that you'd like to dispel.
I think also on the lines of, that there are more than just substance use addictions, and that I know for myself within my own family, talking about how, um, you know, one, that gambling is, well, at least I'm not drinking, you know,
Mm,
and gambling all the money away, but at least I'm not drinking. And, and so those shopping,
Yeah,
a relationship,
mhm.
there are so many things that can keep us from our family and have negative. Oh, yes, the phone.
addicted to phones. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in the new DSM now, right? You know that, right? The new DSM technology addiction is actually in there now. I was like, thank goodness, because anyway, sorry, Santana, I didn't mean to.
Yes. And gaming. I mean,
Yes.
like, I think if anything is going to negatively impact yourself and others, I think it is something that we can look at. If there's a reason why we're wanting to escape things when something negative happens, or if nothing happens, if we're bored, then just looking at what are those motivators? Procrastination. Addicted to procrastination. It's like if I wasn't able to get it done like in the last second, I wouldn't keep doing it. And somehow I make it through, and that mindset just flows into so many other things, like whatever my addiction is, if I manage to make it through, then I'm like, okay, well, it's not that bad, because I skated through and I'm good. And yet it has impacted those things. I've just chosen to overlook them because I still manage somehow to skate through. And that's surviving life. I want to live life, and
Mhm.
that's different. It's so much calmer to live life than just to survive it. And I think that's a piece that is important as well.
Absolutely.
Look, you talk about like substance addiction, and then there's process addictions too, right? So you get addicted to doing the same thing over and over again. And if somebody tries to intervene and change that, oh no, 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 no! Don't you dare do that to me. There's so much. Like I have to do if someone interrupts, you know, a process that I have been doing for so long. Like for example, going to the gym. 35, 37 years, I think I've been repeatedly going without fail. And if something gets in the way, that freaks me out, right? And
Mhm.
so it throws my whole day off. And so there are a lot of struggles that people have. And you know, I think you guys covered some of the next question about what you wish people would understand better about mental health and behavioral health.
Mhm.
Thinking of that specific question, is there anything you want to add to what you just now said?
Yeah, and I think it bleeds into the next question too. And I think something else that's worth demystifying is trauma.
Hmm.
A lot of times people feel like, well, I've never had trauma because they have some image in their mind. Who knows what they're thinking? Maybe they're thinking like, well, I wasn't in Vietnam, so I don't have
Hmm.
trauma, or they're like, you know, um, both my parents are alive. They didn't die when I was a kid, so I don't have trauma. But, the reality is almost everybody has survived trauma. And the thing about trauma that I really want people to understand is, number one, most people have it, and number two, sometimes people feel like they should be over something, or they feel like they got over something, whatever that means, like I'm over it, but then it comes back up later on, and they feel like they failed somehow, or maybe they weren't really over it, right? But the way it works is, something, if you survive something really negative, and there'll be a time where it doesn't bother you for a few years maybe, and then all of a sudden something changes in your life and it bothers you again. And I just want to say that's absolutely normal, and it's not a weakness. It's not like you did anything wrong. Some of these things that are in our past, um, they kind of like lay dormant for a while, and then they come for us again, right? And then it really throws us for a loop. Like, a common thing is like with the death of a loved one. What can happen, and I saw this in a family member where they lost one person, and they were kind of numb to the whole grief around it. It affected them, but they got through it, and they were kind of surprised how easily they got through it because they really loved this person. And then they lost another person just like a year later. And now, when they're grieving for this new person that just passed away, who they were not as close to, their whole world is upside down.
Hmm.
And part of it is because, these things kind of build up on each other. And what happened in this person, I'm sure of it, is they didn't really go through a process of grieving the first one because they were in shock. And now with the second one, they're no longer in shock, so they can feel the loss. But now they're actually feeling both losses at the same time, and they're all like twisted up, and it's really difficult for them to deal with or to even make sense of it. you know, and I think that with trauma that happens too, you know. And just using myself as an example, I had a really difficult relationship with my dad. And I feel like I dealt with it as an adolescent, right? Like I said earlier, like I started going to counseling as an adolescent. Um, and then I did, and I really did deal with it, you know, and I wrote him a letter or whatever. And, you know, and then like all of a sudden I became a dad. And then I'm looking at my kids and like, how can my dad do what he did to me, looking at my own son? And so I like confronted him, you know, real life in person. I had this confrontation with him, drove out to Cali. It's all dramatic. And so I had this confrontation. I was like, well, there you go. Now I really dealt with it. Right. And then like, you know, my son gets to the age that I was when my dad walked out on us. And I had all these feelings again, you know, and then I lost my father-in-law and I had all these feelings again. You know, it all stems back to the same root. And I think that, you know, younger me would really beat myself up, but like, why can't you just get over this? You know, I thought you dealt with this when you were a teenager. But, you know, the wiser part of me says, of course, you know, it's still the same issue. You're just seeing it from a different light as you get older. And I think that that's something that that doesn't get talked about a lot. I think that people feel like, you know, they've been through something and they dealt with it like, oh no, it's in my past, I dealt with it. It's going to circle back around, you know, and you're going to have to deal with it again. So just number one, be ready for it as much as you can. And when it does come for you, sit with it, see what you can learn from it this time, this go round, and then it'll go away for a while, I think. And then you'll learn again the next time. So I think that that's something that I've picked up on more as I get older, that I didn't really know, even as a professional. You know, I felt like you have trauma, you go to a therapist, they do some stuff with you, and then you process the trauma. And now it's done. You know, like EMDR it's a therapy. We don't need to get into it, but it's a therapy that works with trauma. And when it first came out, everybody thought like it was the answer. And you know what we're finding out is that sure, it's the answer for a while. You know, and then sometimes, you know, it gets reactivated, and it's not because you didn't do it right. You know, it's just that's the nature of what we're dealing with as people.
And you made the comment about dealing with it.
Yeah,
one of the big questions is, what does that even mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us have been
Right.
through a lot of stuff, and we feel every day
Yeah.
that we dealt with it. And many people feel like they dealt with it because it's no longer affecting them. It's not actively affecting them, right? They've learned some coping skills over the years to deal with what they were experiencing. But like you said, when things came up that triggered the thoughts or memories, it reactivated again. You know, and I'm very open about my stuff. I mean, I talk to people about, you know, having an ACE score of 10. I have an ACE score of 10,
Yeah.
right? So I've had just about every single childhood trauma you can think of, right?
Yeah.
And I look at it from the perspective of I've dealt with a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't resolve it, right? So I've had to just manage it throughout the years because there's so much to deal with. I just work through it in a way that helps me to keep moving forward. And this is what we do. Like Santana was saying earlier, it's like sometimes you just feel like you're just surviving. You're not thriving at all. You're just surviving. You're just living every single day. Like, okay, another day, woke up, everything feels good. But then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, somebody at work says something that triggers a thought in your mind. And you're like, why did that affect me like that?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even that big of a deal. And it triggers something. So dealing with something, at least people's perception of dealing with something, is not always what is not what is, at least some of those professionals think some folks should be doing to deal with it. Like burying it in the back of your brain so you don't think about it again is not dealing with it. You know?
Yeah.
But that's what we do as human beings. We just don't want to think about it, right?
Avoiding all thoughts or reminders of a thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Trauma is a big thing, and it's both interpersonal, but there's also some genetic predispositions that are passed down through epigenetics because of
Sure.
what your ancestors dealt with. So people don't realize that a lot of that affects the reason why they're not managing their emotions, the reason why their coping skills diminish after a while, is because there are some things, some other stuff there, right? Historical things, and we can obviously that's a whole other conversation that would take
Yeah.
hours to discuss, but there is a huge misconception about trauma because people think that trauma is a specific thing.
Right.
You've been experienced sexual abuse, or you've been experienced domestic violence, or you've been attacked, or you were in war, or those big capital T traumas is what people think about. But attachment trauma, for example, is nobody really talks about that, but that is one of the biggest things that people deal with throughout their entire lives. But
Mhm.
nobody looks at that as trauma. So um looks like we're getting short on time there. Real
We can
quick.
always come back too, by the way.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask two more questions, because one of the things that comes up a lot, um, are questions about the capital S word, right? People don't want to talk about suicide,
Oh,
and when we talk about mental health, um, suicide tends to be the first thing that comes to people's mind, but it never comes out of their mouths, right? They think about it. People think about depression and people who die by suicide, but nobody wants to talk about it because it's such a taboo topic. And so, um, what if you first of all tell me what your thoughts are about um, you know, uh, the epidemic really of suicide in across the country in indigenous communities. What are your thoughts about why that is?
did you want to go first this time, Santana?
Nope.
Well, okay, so first thing I want to do is just put it in perspective, because I think that sometimes in tribal communities or just, working in Indian country in general, we really, it's right to talk about these things as epidemics, or even alcoholism. But I always just like people to know that this isn't like a native problem, right? There's
Correct.
nothing necessarily
Mhm.
broken, on reservations even. Like even if we look at suicide, one fact that people don't know is more soldiers die from suicide than combat.
Correct.
And that's an epidemic, right? When
22
if you
days.
look at young people, who are the ones that are most likely to commit suicide? It's not young native males, although they're up there, right? It's actually people that identify as trans, or on that continuum. Those are the ones at most risk. And so I do want to just say that sometimes the stigma gets put on just native communities in general, that, oh, those people have those problems, right? um, and uh, and it's true. There are problems in Indian country, but there's nothing particularly problematic about growing up native. I mean, there's a lot of beauty in it too. So I wanted to just say that first. But I will say, just in working in tribal communities, I think one of the things that's always difficult is, I think sometimes, depending on how traditional the community is, whether or not people use the word suicide at all, or admit when somebody does do that. It just gets quickly like dismissed, or there's just like this very loud silence around it, like what happened, and nobody wants to talk about it. And then there's shame around it too, in that family sometimes. And it's really unfortunate, that, because in a way that perpetuates the problem. But I will say, when I think of suicide, just as a clinician working in a few different tribal communities, the ones that I worry about the most are going to be young males who just had an abrupt end to a relationship, and they
Hmm.
also abuse substances. In my mind, that's like the hot spot, you know. And I think that, you know, there are clusters that happen with the younger people, like in high school. Like you'll see that in Indian country too, where there's one attempt or one suicide, and then like a cluster happens where now all of a sudden there was five in a community in a year of young people. And that's really, I don't have an answer for that as far as why that happens, but those kind of clusters do seem to happen more in tribal communities. But I think in general, when we're trying to prevent suicide, is we got to watch out for our native young men, young adult men, high school and all the way up until like, you know, probably their 30s. When they lose relationships or they discover like a betrayal or they get, you know, dumped or something like that, or, you know, there's just an abrupt end to a relationship, those are the ones that I think are not only we need to keep a close eye on them for suicide, but also homicide,
Hmm.
because there's just something so in their mind that's just so tragic about what just happened, um, that it just completely overwhelms them. And then you add alcohol or some other substance to it. Now it's really a fire that can hurt a lot of people. So I think that that's just in general one thing that I would just like to put out there is that young men in relationships, if those relationships end, that's who I would look at. You know, even in families where the family can have a response to that, where they just really surround that person with love and understanding and patience, and try to interrupt any kind of rash behavior that that young man might want to do. Probably not a direction you thought I'd go.
No, well, you know, you know, I've heard of the clusters. They call it a suicidal intensity
Yeah.
cluster within a community, and a lot of times it's, you know, when I brought that topic up, when I asked that question, you know, when I mentioned epidemic, I think
Hmm.
I'm looking at it from the perspective of when we look at per capita,
Yeah.
you know, Native
Sure.
communities have a higher rate of suicide amongst the young people, the 15 to 34, than other ethnicities, and
Yeah.
so that was the reason why it's constantly talked about. I mean, there hasn't been a rash of those types of behaviors that we know of in the community. We've had some overdoses
Mm.
that there may have been there's some suspicion that it may not have been accidental.
Mm.
And so we have to look at that perspective too. When you have drug overdoses, when people think those are accidental overdoses, sometimes they could be suicide. And
Mm.
so the suicidal intensity issue is just something that we want to keep an eye on, to make sure there are no issues. And a lot of people have come and said, "Well, this person's talking about they want to die. This person's talking about, like you said, they have been overwhelmed. Their ability to cope has been overwhelmed, and they don't know what to do with it." And that's where you have that either internalized violence or externalized violence, whether it's suicide or homicide, that can show itself. And so if you could give any advice to a member of the community who might be concerned about a friend or family who might have those thoughts or feelings, and this is to both of you, what would you suggest they do? How do you suggest they help them or try to help them?
Um, well, I know that there are different resources that we can do as far as calling hotlines. Um, but I also feel like when there is something so personal as your loved one expressing themselves in such an alarming way, um, I do agree with Brian of, treating our loved ones with care and comfort. I mean, there's there's nothing more impactful than um, having someone asking for help without asking for help. And
Mm.
it is so um, just feeling completely helpless in those moments. And like Brian said, just offering some words, anything, even I think, especially with our community, a hug, um, going out into nature somehow together, having those pieces that are so ingrained in us, which is finding that person that is comforting to that other person. Like I know for myself, um, it would have been my grandma. Like I'm gonna call grandma and ask her to come over, and or grandma's on the phone, she wants to talk to you. Like making that kind of connection with each other, because there is that within our native communities. And and it and it's not so much giving the responsibility of um, making that change in that mindset, but hopefully just a momentary reminder that we do have each other. And so, there is so much that we as Native people have within our experiences. I mean, we were brought up with historical trauma from boarding schools, and the impact and how it just passes on and passes on and passes on, and just intact. And 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 those parenting inabilities, or unknowing of those abilities, not having that touch, the comforting, not growing up that way, it's so difficult to have that today. And so we're definitely impacted by the lack of connection, in that way, and the expectations of our traditional roles, and having to fulfill those as well, and our beliefs. It is, we are to be strong. We're supposed to be strong, and we are. And so to feel less than that is, oh, embarrassing.
Hmm.
So connecting to that person, I think, is so helpful. And it doesn't, again, have to be, like Brian said, it doesn't have to be the right words, but reaching out is a huge thing for us, like in any form, especially, and to have somebody that you can speak to anonymously, even better.
And someone you can relate to, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the things is like, we talk about 988 being an option for tribal communities. There are some challenges, I think, for Sinai, not having their own law enforcement, and, not having a, emergency response type of team that could respond to the community. But I think that having someone, because now they actually have folks who identify as native on the calls at the call center, where you can actually either text or or talk to you on the phone at 988 and have those conversations with people. Because you know especially young people, they the embarrassment that I think comes along with the stigma around um, mental health and behavioral health challenges. They've adopted some of those things, and so having a connection with someone that they may be able to relate to, even if um, uh, they're not a Pueblo Indian, so to speak, or they're not from the northern New Mexico. At least if they're an indigenous youth, someone who could potentially relate to some of the challenges they're experiencing, that's better than not having anybody. And so I think providing people with those opportunities to talk to somebody, even if it's just brief, have some connection. We know that lack of connection is one of the um, risk factors for suicide, and having poor outcomes from behavioral health challenges. And if they have the challenges at home in their house, and their lack of connection in their intimate family is off, they need to have somebody. And so I think that there's so much more that can be and needs to be done. I think that you guys coming on board and bringing your services and expertise to the table and to the community is going to do wonders. And I'm looking forward to um, seeing how much benefit can be, obtained from the work that you guys are going to do in the community. And so, if someone in the community needed to contact you all and make an appointment or try to schedule with something with you guys to um, get services, what is the best way for them to do so?
I can be contacted on my cell phone number, my work cell number, or on my email. My cell number is 505 370 7499. 370 7499. Or my email is Santana at Serna Solutions LLC.com. Just my first name, Santana at Serna Solutions LLC.com.
And
That is
one thing that we're also working on is creating on our website, we're going to create a tab just for services and Sanai. And there's going to be an online submission form where people can self-refer. So if you're interested in accessing our services, you can just go to our website and put in your contact info, and it'll be completely secure. It has secure socket layering, whatever, on it. So it just goes, and we're going to set it up to where it goes directly to Santana. We haven't set it up yet, but that's in the works. And you can also refer someone else. Like if you work in a program in Sanai and you want to make a referral for somebody, you can do it through our website, and it'll be on the website. It'll say, does this person know that you're making the referral? Different things like that. So that'll be another way to send people our direction. But the easiest way right now is to use Santana's email and phone number that you put up there.
Well, it's been an honor to have you all here with us today and talking
Thank you.
about the challenges that some of us. I mean, I always try to point the finger at people and say, not point finger at people, but make a point to people and say, we're all human beings. Every one of us are going to have struggles. Every one of us are going to go through some things. And I think that um, most people don't seek out help because they don't know where to find it. Most people don't seek out help because they don't recognize that what they're going through is something that they need help for. Many people don't seek out help because the stigma that's been created within their families and their social networks, that kind of encourages them not to, makes them seem like they're weak or something's wrong with them if they actually seek out help or even acknowledge that they have a problem. Those are preventing them from seeking out help. And I think these conversations that we're having, this conversation we had today, at least bringing some light to some of the challenges, um, personal disclosures, and the fact that all three of us have basically we've had our struggles, right?
Mhm.
And we're still here, sitting in front of the screen, talking to people and saying we're here to help you if you need it. And so, giving that example, they may not have it at home, but maybe we could be that example. And the more we talk about this, the more we bring it up in conversation, make it part of the normal lexicon, so to speak. I think will make it easier for people to seek out help if they need it, recognize when people need help, and have resources that um, they can refer people to. And I really harp on the QPR model of the question, um, um, persuade and refer option, because I think that people don't realize that that question part, the Q part, is the most important thing. We talked about it earlier. Start the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Have a conversation with people. That is going to help bring light to some of the challenges that we have and make sure people understand that the referral might be coming next. Hey, you might need some help. Um, and so these things are, um, awareness it comes in many different forms, but I think that the knowledge in general is what we're going to be able to kind of glean from what we talked about today. And I appreciate everything that you all have done with our conversation today. Um, for those of you who are watching or who may be watching this later, I'm requesting, I'm asking you to please share this link, share this conversation with your friends and your family who may not have been able to either tune in today or don't know that this is happening, because the awareness goes a long way. Um, we always talk about there's nothing out there for our people. That's what I hear all the time. And now we can point people in the right direction. You have Santana's email on the screen, her phone numbers on the screen. If you need to talk to her or talk to have her connect you with someone to talk to, um, it's that easy. I know it's hard up here sometimes, but it's that easy. An email, you don't have to talk to her directly. Just send her an email and say, "Hey, I'm interested in maybe getting some services." I appreciate the fact that the tribal courts have come out and said they want to refer people to you all to help, because we've had the revolving door of substance use challenges through the courts, people who are experiencing mental health concerns, people who have had these emotional and behavioral challenges for many, many years with no place to go, or the revolving door of inpatient, 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 and nothing's happening. Well, here we have you guys here that are going to be on site, and everybody out there, this is your opportunity. Your own Sinai has its own service now. You don't have to go outside. You don't have to look for it online. You don't have to Google it. You don't have to rely on inconsistency. You have this team right here that's going to be here to help. And Santana and Brian, I really do appreciate your time. I really do appreciate your conversation, and we'll have to come back and do this again. Um, and there's a lot more that we didn't get to, but there's always stuff to talk about when it comes to mental health awareness, and we have a whole month to do it, a whole 27 more days. If we wanted to add another one of these. So you guys have any final thoughts or comments before we go?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for having us. We look forward to working in Sinai. And I think both of us do have to run.
All right, sorry for keeping you over, and
Not a problem.
we will see you all next time.
Yeah, sounds
Great.
good.
Look
All right.
forward to it.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.